Few things are for sure in this life, but this is. If we live for any substantial amount of time, we will encounter grief due to the loss of a loved one. Not something any of us ever want, and we all handle it differently. This podcast is to feature those who have done purposeful and meaningful things through their grief. These people featured on here are normal folks, just like you and me, who were thrust into a place they never wanted to be in their lives. A painful place. As they move through their pain, they realize that something worthwhile, something for the greater good, could come out of the unthinkable. I'm sure that none of them would ever consider themselves to be a hero, but when I searched the definition of the word hero, I found this: a person who is admired or idolized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. And that fit. And so it's my privilege to bring you the remarkable stories of these heroes in grief. Hi, everyone. This is Tom, your host for the Heroes in Grief podcast, and the response has been incredible so far, and I want to thank you for that. It's getting out to people, and they're letting us know that it's helping them, and that is what it's all about. I want to make you aware of a way that you can support this podcast without having to spend 1 cent, and that is through affiliate marketing. I've set up affiliate marketing for online shopping. If you do online shopping, then I have links to all the major retailers, most of them anyways, and I can provide them for you so that when you buy online through those links, you'll help support the podcast through the percentages that we get. It doesn't cost you anything more. You just shop like you regularly would on the sites that you love. It's very easy. All you have to do is shop. And that's it. Just let me know the links to the places that you want to shop at, and I will provide the affiliate links so that you can do it. If you want more information on this, you can go to heroesingrief.com. It takes you to the Linktree page where a video explains it in a little more detail. But you can always email me at tom@heroesingrief.com, and I can answer questions for you. But you can support the podcast that way, and it's very easy, very simple, and it doesn't cost you a cent. Isn't that great? Thank you. Now here's today's episode. So hi, Carla. How are you?
Hi, Tom. Good. It's so nice to connect.
Yeah, we're rolling already, just so you know. So we just talk, and I want everybody to learn about Carla and what your story is and what you're doing with things, because you got some good things happening.
I know.
Yeah, that's what it's all about on Heroes in Grief. We just try to get the grief stories out there if people are comfortable with that. And then about the resources that people are making available to other people in grief. That's the great part about it. And I do want to mention here early in the podcast, because I leave it at the end and I don't know if everybody always gets through, but we always put all the information on the guests that we have in the show notes. So just look in the show notes wherever you're watching the podcast or listening to the podcast, and you'll find the information that you need there. All right. So little promo there.
That's so nice.
Yeah. Well, that's what it's all about. It's to get your stories out, because stories meant so much to me in my early grief. That's why I do this. And, there's always something to take out of it on how people are dealing with their own grief. So that's helped me a lot. And that was the first part of it. And then I saw, wow, people are doing such amazing things out there, and all these different ways that they're expressing and honoring their loved ones. And it just was so neat, because I thought, wow, there's so many different things that it seems that there's something for everybody out there. So with people needing so much in grief, I want to make it available for them. So that's what it is. So,
well, that's beautiful. And I couldn't agree with you more, because the way I first heard about you was through Helping Parents Heal, which is the story of a mom who saw a need for this, right? And Elizabeth Wasson, I think that's how you say her name.
Yeah.
And they all came together, and I couldn't agree more. It's the stories that help us move forward and know that we're going to get through our grief, because in the very beginning, you're not sure that you're going to make it through, right?
That's for sure. Yeah.
I remember, so to give you some background on my story, my son Calder crossed 7 days after his 7th birthday. And it was a complete shock. He wasn't sick. We for the first time in like months, we had something to do outside of the house, my husband and I together. So we went to this event and we got the call that no parent wants to get. And we rushed to try to get home, but it was like all this crazy traffic and all these things were happening. And then by the time we were headed that way, an ambulance had come and taken him to the hospital. And, it's just you immediately go into flight or fight and survival mode. And like all the parents out there, like we all have a story. And I feel like, Tom, you and I were talking about how people don't really want to talk about it. They don't want to hear the story. They even don't want you to talk about your child who's no longer in the physical. It makes them uncomfortable. Yep. And so it became important for me to educate people and help people. And from the very beginning, my husband is very much more like practical, and he immediately jumped into action and said, let's start a foundation. So we did in the very early stages of grief. And it was important for us to name the foundation after both of our sons because we still have a son here in the physical. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, that's good. And I like that balance too. And there's a few things you brought out there. The other people in grief, most of us who have lost children, especially, we want to talk about our loved ones. We want to, it helps us keep in touch a lot of times. There are cases out there, of course, of people who are so sensitive and still in a bad place or something, and they may not want to, but it's worth the ask. All right. I just want to tell everyone it's worth the ask because we feel isolated in our grief and we want to, when you ask us about things or engage with us, then it brings us back to the foundation and to reality because it's so, like you said, it's mind blowing and it's so hard to deal with. And you're in this other realm. It's just, it's surreal. You're lost. And when, those are early stages. Yes. But I mean, even as things go on, we want to feel the foundation. We want to know we're still alive too. And so, because sometimes we don't feel that way, and so for the other people out there, and I'm really passionate about helping the others around grief get engaged too and understand better how to deal with it and how to deal with a grieving person. And we all are going to deal with grief. So we know how to deal with it. We need to know how to deal with it ourselves too. Now, your husband is a good balance, and that's his way. Obviously, that was his way of dealing with the grief is just, I got to do something. I got to start something. I got to do something. And so another important fact for people out there to be aware of that, let people grieve the way that they need to grieve, and it would be easy to say, what do you mean? What are you talking about right now? A foundation? That's ridiculous. How can you not even, I don't know if you experience that or not, but I mean, that could be a reaction. Like, what are you talking about?
No, absolutely. I feel like what you're saying is so valid because everyone grieves differently. And my husband and I grieved completely differently. He was very outward, getting into the community, and I was with him, but I was much more internal and trying to hold on to what was going on, like making sure our younger son was okay because our sons are 2 years and 2 months apart. Ooh. So he was not even 5 when this happened, but he was at home when the accident occurred.
Wow.
So it was an accident in our backyard, in our swimming pool. And it was this crazy thing with faulty wiring in our swimming pool light that turned out to be high voltage, which nobody would think of that in there, or even that there's a light in the swimming pool. It's just something that comes along with it. But so I just was trying to figure out how to grieve, make sure my son who is here okay, but at the same time, Tom, I was getting messages from my son who had crossed almost immediately, but I just couldn't understand that part of the journey at all back then.
Yeah, I want to say I'm terribly sorry, of course. I always want to tell
Thank
people
you.
that.
Yeah.
Did you get, now you said you were getting messages right away. Were you getting messages before this ever happened? Was that part of your life?
No, that was not part of my life. I feel like that's why so I am right now, just so you know, and to put it into context, we are in the 10th year since Calder crossed. And it took me a really long time to be able to take each step to becoming the person I am today because it was so, we are completely shattered when something like this happens, as I'm sure you were also.
Yeah.
When your son crossed. And so I immediately was like, Chris jumped into action. I was not sure what to do. I wasn't sure if I was going to stay here. I'm sure many parents have that thought, like, do I want to be here without my child? But luckily, I have, my husband was very supportive. I had another child. I had family rally around me and be very supportive. So in the beginning, I did not understand what it meant to get a sign from the other side. But like things happen in this world, I kept stumbling on things. Like I would have a dragonfly land on my head, but I didn't know what that meant. I was like, okay, dragonfly landed on my head.
Yeah, get out of here, right?
Exactly. Or something like that. And then the most unbelievable thing happened that we also we have worked for years in television. So at the time, we had a gentleman working for us who was developing shows, and he said, to Chris. Now, I wasn't going into the office at that point. I was like a vegetable. But he said to my husband, Chris, hey, I know a medium if you'd like a reading. And when I tell you, my husband didn't even know what a medium was at that point. He was like, I mean, sure. I think when you're broken open in that way, you will just try anything to try to, alleviate some of the pain, to see what's out there besides your own belief system. And so he did end up doing a reading with a medium named AJ Barrera, who's amazing. And he didn't tell me for a couple of days because he wasn't sure what to make of it.
Yeah, and that's a little out of the norm for the guy to do that and not the woman, right?
Right? Totally. And so luckily this medium was very professional and he always recorded his readings and then he'd send them to you. It was an audio recording. And so like days later, my husband said, I was just like, he would get home and I would have put our son Caleb to bed and he'd be like, and I'd be crying. Like whatever I was doing, I was just in a constant state of tears. And he was like, are you like this every day? Are you like this all day while I'm gone? And I said, I try to keep it at bay until I put Caleb to bed, but I have to let it out. It's just, I don't know what to do. And he said, well, I have something to tell you. And I was like, it sounded foreboding. I'm like, okay.
Right, you're thinking the worst, right? What else could be worse? What are you laying on me now?
Exactly. That's exactly what I thought. Well, it couldn't be worse than anything that's happened. So go ahead. And he told me he had this reading and he played it for me, the recording. And I couldn't believe it, but I believed it, but I couldn't believe it. And at the end of the reading, he said to the medium, well, can you do this for my wife? Because she doesn't know, and I'm sure she would love it. And the medium said, why don't you play the recording to see if she's even open to this kind of thing? And in my, grief head, I was like, oh, he's saying he's not going to give me a reading, but he'll give my husband a reading. And I became like obsessed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I looked it up online, and I ended up finding that he was doing a seminar in Virginia Beach. Now, I'm in Miami, Florida. I've never been to Virginia Beach in my life. And my husband wakes up the next morning, and I'm like, I booked a plane ticket, and I'm going to Virginia Beach for a medium conference. And he was like,
how far down the line is this?
This is literally 3.5 months after Calder crossed.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's pretty early.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I really hadn't been able to do anything except get out of bed, take Caleb to school, and then come home. It was like I was just in a loop. And then so to have me say, hey, I'm hopping on a plane, and by the way, I'm going to a medium convention, and I'm doing it under a false name, so I'm going to pay in cash. I just want you to know where I'm going to be.
Sounds like some covert action or something.
I thought I was being so clever going undercover to figure it out. Anyway, so I got there, and of course the guy didn't recognize me because he had never seen me. Yeah. He had been speaking to my husband on the phone, but I wasn't sure what to make of it, like what to make of mediums, or, there are some charlatans in the business who I've also never run across someone who's not a good medium with good intentions, but I have heard that there are people like that.
Yeah.
And coming from my background of working in television, I thought, I'm just going to make sure nobody can tell that I'm who I am or anything. But I got there.
Carla, yeah. Before you go further, what kinds of things, if you don't mind sharing, did your husband hear in that? Or what did you guys hear? Yeah, in your reading, what kind of things came out?
So we listened to the reading together, and he was going to do it for 15 minutes, but it turned out being like a 45-minute reading. And it was so evidential that in the beginning, you can hear on the recording, my husband's like, what do you mean? What's happening? And he's like, just be open and listen to me. And first, my husband's mother came through because she had also died in the last year. And she came through with, just letting us know she was okay. She had a stroke before she died. And he gave evidence to that. And then he said, but now she's strong again. And she wants to be adamant that you know how strong she is because she was a strong woman. Yeah. So that was believable. And then he wasn't someone who necessarily got full names. But he was like, okay, there's a CA name here. Now, I'm Carla, Caleb, Calder. There's a lot of CA names. But then he goes, no. This is your contemporary. This is your wife. Your mother wants you to know, and your wife to know, who's not here, that she's bringing a younger energy into this reading because she wants both of you to know that this younger energy is here for both of you. And from there, it unfolded. And this is a young son, and he's giving me the feeling that he's around 8 or 9 years old. And it was just like piece of information after piece of information. He even described the scene of the day where Calder crossed being tied to electricity. Which was kind of hard to hear, but he was very specific, and he was very clear that Calder was not in pain because what does every parent want to know?
Yeah, that everything was okay, right? That it wasn't painful, wasn't fearful, all those things.
all those things. So he was able to express to us that, like, the way he was even moving and he started laughing and giggling, the medium, and he was like, this energy is so like fun, and he's like doing all these things, and you know how a really good medium like embodies the personality of the person. So he totally had it. And at the end of the reading, after 40, it was just unbelievable evidence. But at the end of the reading, my husband's like, does he have anything else to say? You know, you don't want to stop.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, he is saying, Chris, he wants you to know he has his glasses, which is so funny because they don't need glasses on the other side.
No.
But it was such a huge piece of information that was evidential to us because we had been looking for his glasses for months since we had left the house. And it turned out that morning, Chris found out they had been put in the casket with him. So he was verifying that he had the glasses.
Wow.
Now, there's no way this guy could know that, right?
Yeah.
So it was just a beautiful confirmation.
Thank you for sharing all that. That's awesome. And you did say evidential. In the beginning, you said evidential, and people may hear this term and they don't know about it, but evidential mediums, they bring evidence. That's simply it, right? And evidence that can verify personally to you that this is your person. So that's what evidential mediumship. So when you go to a good evidential medium, they're going to blow you away like that with those type of things. It's not going to be surface stuff like, oh, they love you and they want you to know this. And they will tell you that they love you, of course. But you know, sometimes you get just these general aspects that could be for anybody. And it's not that way with a good evidential medium, right?
Exactly. And anyway, that led me on the path to go there and then see if it was, even though that was so evidential, it was something about seeing it in person with my own eyes that I just had to do. So I did end up going to this mediumship convention, not really thinking through the haze of grief. Everyone there's a medium and you're not. So you're going to a convention where people are going to be like doing readings and like I didn't know what it was going to be. But so I got there and I used a fake name. So everyone referred to me as Melanie from Miami. They were like, oh, and how long have you been a medium? And so I was kind of, I wasn't great at being undercover, but I just kind of kept quiet and kept to myself. And this is a great point for people also about mediums. So they don't necessarily, just like my husband's mother came through first in the reading, it's not like you're there to hear from your son and that's the first person that's going to come through, because they have to be able to work with the medium. There could be a reason they want to bring this other person through first. It could be to build the energy. So during the course of this weekend, I got a reading, and there was another medium there, and she kept bringing the information to me. She's like, I'm sure it was a gallery of 25 people. And she was like, I'm sure I'm with you, to me. And I thought, I don't know what she's talking about, because I only wanted to hear from my son, right?
Yeah, sure.
And it turned out she was bringing through one of my closest friends from California, but I wasn't thinking about her. I mean, I always apologize. Like, sorry, I wasn't thinking about you.
She let you know anyways. It's all right.
Exactly. So I rejected the whole reading, which can happen. And then later that night, after I had been asleep at 3 a.m., I woke up and I was, oh my gosh, she was talking about my friend Sultan. Like my friend and it totally, I think it aligned me so that the next day when my son did come through, I believed it wholeheartedly. Not just from the evidence, but from the fact that it kind of opened me up to this belief system. That this would happen.
Yeah, that openness is so important because we can block it with our grief and we can block it with our doubts. it's going to happen. You talked a couple times about the difference of knowing and believing, or believing in this, but also having doubts. And our humanness will always do that. We're always going to have it. So I fight it all the time. I say, I firmly believe and know that there's an afterlife now. I believe it wholeheartedly. I don't doubt it anymore at all. But my humanness will always struggle with it for the rest of my life. And that's just the way it is, right? Some days you're like a little more like, oh, is this stuff really real? Like everybody does. And so it's all normal. But I know through all these evidences, people I've talked to, things that have occurred with me, everything else, that there is no doubt about it, that there's no doubt that there's afterlife. I heard Mark Pitstick say at the conference. Were you at the conference this past year?
I was not at this one. No.
Yeah, he was speaking, and he's the first person I ever said there is no doubt that there's an afterlife. There's proof that there's an afterlife. And I mean, everybody says there's enough evidence to show that, or, all these things, evidences will prove. But he said there is no doubt there's an afterlife, and now it's proven scientifically. And so that helped me along the way. But then I finally just said, you know what? I'm done with this. I'm done apologizing. When you talk to people, sometimes you kind of skirt around it and you kind of like, bring it into it. No, this is it. This is fact. And I know it is. So if you think I'm crazy, that's up to you, whatever. I don't care, but there is an afterlife and we know this. And so, but your humanness will always be in there, and that's normal. So if someone out there is going through this and they want to open up to this and everything, then just know that that's going to be there, because that's why you have to kind of bring yourself into a good place with that. Sometimes, use meditation, use things to get you in the right frequency level to be receiving this and that type of thing. So sounds all woo woo to people, but it's really not. It's just centering yourself and finding a peace and opening yourself up. So that's 100%. How you can do it, Yeah.
I completely agree with you. And also, what people think, that meditation is such a difficult thing that, oh no, I can't quiet my mind. I'm so busy. I have so many things going on. And it's like anything else. It's a muscle. You just start small and you build it. Suzanne Giesemann, you're familiar with her from Helping Parents Heal, right?
Yeah.
So she has a bunch of free things on her website, and one of them is a small 3-minute meditation, because she fully believes that anyone can get there if you start small. And so she's like, I don't want to hear any more excuses. This is called, I think it's called SIP, S-I-P. So It's just a sip of the divine. It's 3 minutes. She's like, anyone can sit there for 3 minutes and open yourself up and quiet your mind. And I was going to say, in the beginning, when I started having these experiences and I started to meditate, I had difficulty. I would start to meditate and I would get my grocery list and the things I haven't done in the house, laundry sitting. You go through your humanness, as you were saying, Tom. And I learned, at first I wrote it all down because I was like, if I write it down, I'll get it out of my head. But then over time, I learned how to say, okay, I had a thought, let it go. Like, it's not that big a deal. Mm-hmm. Let it float out.
Hello, friends. I just wanted to take a brief break here in the podcast to make you aware of a very exciting partnership that Heroes in Grief has just formed, and that is with Get Griefy Magazine. I'm going to let their founder and editor-in-chief, Kara Sanchez, tell you all about it.
Hey, Heroes in Grief listeners. Life after loss isn't easy, but it can be colorful and full of possibilities. Meet Get Griefy Magazine, a vibrant resource filled with inspiring stories of life after loss, expert advice, and voices from everyday grievers and thought leaders. Together, they're here to help guide you toward the side of life that's left to be lived fully and authentically. Dive into Get Griefy for free on issue or snag a print copy on Amazon. Connect with us on Instagram at Get Griefy Magazine or visit getgriefymagazine.com to explore, join our thriving small business collective, or discover advertising opportunities. Let's embrace life after loss, boldly and together.
And now back to our episode.
So during this magical, I guess, awakening along the way, so Calder died in 2014. It took me years to be able to, like a baby like lamb, start to walk again.
Mm-hmm.
And then COVID hit in 2020, and by then I had so many positive experience with mediumship. I felt like I was becoming like the spokesperson. Like you said, at first I wouldn't talk about it, but then I just wanted to tell everyone because it felt like it was the most healing thing that happened to me. So a year after the AJ experience, me going undercover, I met another medium named Laura Lynn Jackson. Have you heard of her?
No.
She wrote a book called Signs. And it's a great book if anybody out there wants to.
You know what? I may have listened to that. I listen to audiobooks all the time. And, and early on, I know I listened to one on signs. I'm going to have to see if that was the one.
I'm sure it was, because it came out, I think, around 2015 or 16. And because of all these different connections and the way the universe works, I ended up sitting across from her at her kitchen table, which is unheard of now because her books have gone on to be, it's like getting a reading with Suzanne Giesman. She has, or even Farrah Gibson, she has a long waiting list because when you're that good, everybody wants a reading with you. And it's beautiful. So she ended up giving me a reading that is in that book, Signs, because I was like, she called and said, can I include this in the book? And I said, of course, please. And it was about Calder's very, so when he left us, he was a rambunctious 7-year-old, right? So he retains that high energy. But weirdly, everyone in my life, his whole life, was like, oh, he's such an old soul. And I'm like, he was so high energy, and with 2 boys in the house, they were just like ricochets banging off of everything. But so he retained that energy that he still has to this day. And during this reading, he said to Laura, oh, tell my mom I'm going to send her a deer. And Laura's like, what? You're going to send her a deer? And she was like, there must be a trip coming up, but Calder wants you to know he's going to send you a deer, and you're going to have an experience one-on-one with a deer. And that was one statement in a 45-minute reading. And we were both kind of like, okay, didn't think about it again. But that's the story that's in the book, because a couple of days later, my husband and I and Caleb drove down to Key West, which we do frequently. And I had never heard of deer in Florida. I'm sure there are other places too. But on the drive on the way down, my husband goes, whoa, look at that, 4 deer on the side of the highway. And I was like, what? First of all, I hadn't shared with him about the reading because he wasn't into it at that time. And then to see the deer, but then I missed it because we were in the car going fast and he was the driver, so he had seen it. And I was just kind of like devastated that I had missed this sign from my son. And I burst into tears, and my poor husband was like, why are you crying? Like, what's happening? And so I told him the story on the way down we didn't turn around because we were going 60 miles an hour, and the chances of the deer still being there. Anyway, so later in the weekend, on our way home, I was just kind of internally devastated the whole weekend, but I didn't want to talk about it constantly. So I was just kind of holding it in. And on the way home, we stopped at this place called the No Name Pub because we needed a bathroom break and we were taking turns going in. And my husband goes into the bar and he goes, and I'm just sitting in the car with Caleb, who's asleep. And I see at the end of the parking lot, Tom, the bushes start to move. And I was like, what is that? And then out of the bushes, this deer starts walking towards our car. And I was like, it's happening. So I tried to get out of the car without scaring the deer. And I got out, but the deer wasn't scared. It walked literally right up to me. And I put my hand out and it put its nose in my hand.
Wow. Amazing. Incredible.
And that's one of those things that you're like, you think is crazy when the medium says it, and then it happens afterwards. And it's the most beautiful evidence, right?
That's where I want to get in with you right there, because I'm always like, you hear these stories all the time, right? And you can believe them, and they sound like there's no way that anybody could have known that and everything. What was going on in you? I mean, you said a few things, but it's like when that's happening and you're processing all of that, what is going on in your head?
I will tell you, it is, well, first of all, I feel like when something happens from the other side that's so intentional and so healing, it's almost as if the energy around you changes a little bit because your loved ones are drawing close to you. And I was kind of in disbelief, but still wanted to have the experience. So I'm like being really like, okay, is this going to happen? Is this that moment? And when I got out of the car and the deer wasn't scared of me, and then I put my hand out and it actually connected with, I mean, I was a little bit afraid. I've never gone up to a wild animal and been like, here.
Yeah, and they're big. Deer are big.
Well, this was a baby one.
Wow.
So it was also a baby, which is also, I guess, important for this story. And then right as I put my hand out, my husband came out of the bar and happened to have his, phone on him, of course, and snapped a picture.
Oh, man.
So he got the picture of the deer putting its nose in my hand.
That is great.
And we get in the car and we're both like, what just happened? Like, did that happen?
Where was Mama Deer?
I don't know.
See,
they must have been, this is there. And it turns out there are deer in Florida. There's the key deer, which are smaller than the, big deer that you see in the rest of the country. But I had just never heard of them. And Chris has been going down there. My husband, Chris, has been going down there for 20 years. He had never seen one until this trip. So it was unbelievable. And yet it was something that turned me completely into being like, okay, like you said, this is real.
Yeah.
If they can do stuff like this.
Yeah.
And so going back to COVID, so I started to read voraciously, like you hear everybody say, listen to the podcast, listen to everything I could listen to. I met another medium who I'm still friends with to this day named Rosie Sapiro, who kind of became my mentor. She'd be like, meditate, do this, talk to your son. Like, she was very helpful in helping me open up. And then during COVID, Suzanne Giesman on the Shift Network did a class. You can become a medium. And I was like, I have another friend who said, let's do it together. Like, she's in California, I'm here, but we could both tune into the class at the same time. So we did do that. And it's unbelievable, even through this technology, that you can feel the energy of the other side gathering for something like that.
That makes sense because everything is energy. And that's been shown now too. And obviously their energy, and they are high energy. So that makes total sense to me anyways, but others out there got to understand that this is what's being shown now, that everything is energy. So that all connects that way. And certainly they can connect through technology because of that. That makes sense. Yeah.
Right. That's what, and Suzanne, I think, uses that as an example. She's like, you believe in your cell phone, right?
Yep.
That's energy going into your phone to talk to someone. And they always use that example. I think you used it too, like when you think of someone and then they call you, like within a few minutes, or maybe Farrah was talking about that on your podcast.
Yeah, probably Farrah.
And I was like, if you pay attention to those things, they're so much more frequent than we believe. They just continue to happen. And so then once we took that class, I was like, oh, this is my calling. I'm going to be a medium. And I'm like, that's the last thing anyone in my household or like life was. I don't know that I announced it like that, but I knew in my heart, like, this is my path. This is the most healing thing. This is what helped me. Everyone who has a reading that connects, it is healing. It helps them. So I took Suzanne's class, and in her class, she talked about her mentor, Mavis Patilla, who's in England. So then I was like, okay, I'm going to take more classes. So everything's online now. So then I just started studying nonstop, class after class, until I was able to connect enough and deliver enough readings to understand that I could do this. And that's another interesting thing, Tom. I think if you're open to it, anyone can do it. It's just a matter of if you can put that part of your mind aside that's like, oh, this isn't real. Oh, I'm not good enough. Oh, I wasn't born a medium. So I like to say I'm a late bloomer because I wasn't like one of those kids who was giving messages or anything.
Yeah.
This all came to pass after my son crossed.
I just had Mark Anthony on, and he said that we all have intuitive abilities. Not everyone is a medium, but I think that what it is it's a calling like anything else and what we're directed to do and what we should be doing. Do I feel like I should be a medium? No. Do I feel like I have the ability to receive? Yes, I certainly do. I'm doing something else and I'm called to do something else. So, for those out there who might be exploring it, then take some steps and see if it's what you're supposed to be doing or what, if you're going to be given that ability, because I think that that's brought on from the spirit world and, opens us up to that level of it, I think anyways. So
that's interesting because I was at a conference in Canada this past summer, and one of the mediums who was teaching it said, everyone can connect with their own personal loved ones. Like you'll have a dream or you'll have a sign and you'll have this connection. She goes, but a medium is someone who can connect a stranger to their loved ones. So I thought, oh, that's super interesting.
Yeah, that aligns with everything I think that Mark was talking about there too. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Wow.
So then if you have a couple more
There's
minutes.
more.
There's more. So then there's a platform called verysoul.com, which I became a volunteer for because I didn't feel comfortable charging people because, like you said, there's a adjustment period when you're like, okay, so I'm now the medium. Like I was used to getting readings from mediums. I wasn't used to being the medium. So then I started donating sessions just to people who were in need, who couldn't afford sessions, which they allow you to do on that platform. You can sign up and your first reading is free. And then you can decide if you ever want to get another reading or not. And so I became a volunteer to give readings whenever someone signed up. Like you can pick I don't know how it works. They either pair you or it's an automated system or you can pick the medium. But so I did that for probably a year. I still do it. I still am on there. And then I was like, okay, I feel confident that this is my calling. And then I realized I needed to write a book. So I wrote a book that I'm now in the process. Everyone will hopefully be able to follow my journey of getting that published and getting it out there. And so it's finished, and now I just have to present it to the world.
Look forward to seeing it. That's for sure.
Oh, thank you.
Hearing about it. Awesome story. Man, there's a lot there. And I want to thank you. Tell everyone out there too. You offered to give me a reading, and I've never had a reading, and so it's pretty interesting because in the men's group, a lot of the guys there have had readings and stuff, and Farrah came through, or Jeff came through to Farrah one time in the men's group there, and then she's like, "Well, have you?" I asked a question and she said, "So are you talking about, the comparison between different readings here? You've had multiple readings." And I said, "No, I've never had a reading." So it's kind of odd, but there is a struggle, I guess, or a difference in the medium community about the service and the calling of being a medium. Some some charge and they have fees for it. Others are, I could never charge for this. And so there's a wide spectrum there. Understanding both sides. I understand both sides, but I don't want to get into the debate about that at all. But so just so everybody knows what kind of things are out there. And everybody always thinks, I live near Lilydale, New York. I don't know if you've heard of it or not, but huge spiritualist community. And I actually grew up in Dunkirk, which is about 5 miles from there. And so very aware of that all the time. And it was always the woo-woo stuff to us. It was always like, that's a weird place. And now I've actually been there to see a conference. Raymond Moody and Eben Alexander were in a panel. They were there for a weekend, but I didn't get to see a lot of them. But so we went up and saw them speak actually. But that's the only time I've been there, besides, I think, driving through when we were younger, drinking beers, driving through to experience that. But there's a wide spectrum out there. But folks, it's not all you sit down with a crystal ball in a dark room, or anything like that. It's much different. And what I've experienced recently and all the people you're talking about, Suzanne was instrumental. She doesn't even know it, but I've never met her, but she is the one who brought me to Helping Parents Heal. And I finally resolved that was who it was. I couldn't remember right offhand, but it was a few months after Jeff passed. And I was doing what you were talking about. I was listening to every podcast. I was watching everything I could. I was listening to everything I could. And came across Suzanne and really appreciated her because of her background and everything. And so I always looked for the people that I thought I could trust in this. And she comes across certainly that way. And, but these people are so genuine and so down to earth in this, and their heart is there to help the others. And so there's a big difference. I think you probably notice it right away when you sit down with somebody, you can tell. And so, I hear a lot of people, Sandra Champlain talks about having, do you offer the guarantee, that if you get into a few minutes with somebody and you realize that it's just not happening, that the medium will say, okay, well, there's no charge here, and we should end this or something like that. So there's all these different ways that it's handled, but the validity of what I've experienced just from hearing what's going on without even experiencing it myself is pretty amazing. And it's brought me to...
we are going to do a reading for you whenever you're ready. I know you said you wanted to invite your wife, which I think is...
And Judy said she'd sit with it. And and she's looking into things. Let's put it that way. She doesn't totally dismiss everything, but she's not at the same place I am with it. So we'll see. And but she receives it for sure. But yeah, it just talking real about everything and real for people. I think that's so important. That they hear these things and they would think, wow, that's just way out there, or that's whacked out, and everybody I've come across for the most part has just been so genuine and so heartfelt in this process and what they want to do for people. And I had Farrah on too, and I had Mark Anthony, and both of them are very passionate about helping parents heal, and they're people who haven't lost children. And I think that shows a lot there, that they realize the need of someone who has lost a child. And this can apply to anybody who loses their person, because your grief is your grief. It's not, I don't get into the comparison thing. Oh, losing a child's the worst thing ever. It's horrible. It's brutal. There's no doubt. But someone who has never had a child and loves somebody and loses them, that is their horrible, and that's their brutal. So, for other people to come in like that from the outside and to give us a foundation to stand on is remarkable. That they give us that ground to stand on, and they see it's coming from the outside, because us on the inside, we talk our jargon, we do all of our things in the losing the child thing and everything, and we're all in the same boat. And sometimes it's nice to hear from the outside that somebody who sees it from the outside and says, wait, I want to bring something to you, and I want to help you with this too. And so I think that's powerful. I really do.
I did too. And I think it's important that you brought up Suzanne, who, every person who is coming from a good place and is a medium and has that kind of background. And I think it's important also to know that, like, someone like that didn't even, as a military person, would have never said. And I feel like, even though I was never a military person, like, we come from the same place, right? Until you need it, you don't really consider it. Like, until something happens in your life that completely undoes your reality. Her stepdaughter was struck by lightning and their grandchild was killed. Our children were killed unexpectedly or died unexpectedly. My best friend's father, who was her person, that, like you're saying, that was her person, even though she has children and thank God they're alive. But when she lost her father, it was so devastating for her. And, I started talking. She watched me go through my transformation because she's been with me for the whole thing. So when her father crossed, she was like, do you think it's possible that you could give me a reading? Mm-hmm. Like, someone who never, and I thought, wow, this is like a ripple effect. Like, people who never could even consider it have touched so many people. So Suzanne, even though I've taken many classes with her, I don't know her either because I haven't met her through the Zoom. Mm-hmm. but she's yet affected both of our lives and so many others. And it's just, I feel like that's so beautiful. Exactly what you're saying. Mark Anthony. Mark Pitzek, is that how you say his name?
Yes. Yeah. The ripple effect.
Yeah.
And that's what I believe we've learned from the spirit world is our purpose here. And of course, love being the major thing that always comes through, love and the depth of love and what that really means in life. And then our love for one another and our care for one another, because we are all together. We're connected together. And the golden rule and how that is in every religion, some semblance of that and everything. There's a reason for that. And that is why, because we're supposed to be doing things to care for one another and help one another. And so when you start doing that, the ripple effect starts happening. The energy keeps going, and that's exciting, you know?
That is true. There is actually a book written by a woman named Carolyn Miss. I think it's Myss. And she actually breaks down all the religions into 7 categories. But you say it best, like it's the golden rule. Everyone needs to be considerate and love and take care of each other. And she literally breaks it down through every religion, how they're all parallel. And yet somehow it got confused through the human experience that either one's better than the other or they're different, but they're not. It's all about exactly what you're saying. All of us reaching out a hand to help the other.
Yeah, I'll go back to Mark Anthony. He said religions in the writing of the text, those kind of things, are man's effort to describe the divine. Something of that nature. And I made that was perfect. I was like, I'm always looking for that. Like, how do I, because my thing always was like, well, they're humans and they were trying to describe, you know, the experiences that we have and everything in their context. And so it came out that way. And then things are interpreted down the line and they're made into religions, which are power monger things and all of this. So, you know, it was great to hear that concise definition of that, you know, man's effort to describe the divine, which is, you know, almost impossible, of course. And you hear near-death experiencers come back and they can't describe the colors that they see or the music that they hear or the things that they see. They can only put it in the context of what we know in our humanness. And that's tough because we're not even close.
I know. Well, I don't know. Do we have another minute?
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard of this latest podcast that seems like a disconnect, but it's not. It's called the Telepathy Tapes.
Yes, I have. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So it's about these nonverbal autistic children. And you listen to the first episode and you're like, oh, that's interesting. So they are communicating actually with their parents through thought. But then as the podcast unravels and you start to hear the stories over and over again, it circles back to exactly what we're talking to, that there's something bigger going on here. And even these children who are nonverbal are able to connect without being in the physical presence of each other. They go to a place that sounds like where the masters teach them. And it was an unraveling of the podcast, because at first I was like, or unfolding, I should say. Unraveling sounds like it's a mess, but
yeah,
it's like you listen to it and you're like, why am I listening to this? And then the more you listen to it, the more you realize it's all connected. And these parents are being told their children aren't in there. And these kids who are nonverbal and their bodies aren't functioning the way they need them to be are actually brilliant minds trapped into these bodies. And they have learned to communicate in different ways. And I was blown away. I had a friend of mine who's a channel tell me, no, listen to the whole thing. Because I was like, I listened to the first episode. Why do you want me to listen to this? And she's like, listen to the whole thing.
Yeah, it keeps building.
It's amazing.
Yeah. I think I'm about 5 or 7 in. I'm not sure, somewhere in there. But yeah. It kept building. And yeah, they go, is it called On the Hill or something like that? Where all where the all the autistic kids, and like you said, they're not even in the same states or something, you know, at times and everything, but they meet like in a group chat in a telepathy group chat where they discuss things. And then there's, you know, talk and evidence of ones who have learned languages and the most complex educational things and everything. And they know all these things without ever being taught them. And it's amazing.
It is. Oh, I just got chills. It's amazing. I haven't heard anything since I started learning about mediumship I haven't heard anything that mind-blowing since then. I was like, wait, we're talking to the dead. And they're also talking to, they say it in different ways, but they're getting taught from like the masters of like, or literary figures, John Steinbeck or Mark Twain. And one of the moms is like, I have 5 kids and I'm a single mom. I didn't have time to read my son Huckleberry Finn, but here he is with all the information.
Yeah.
It's amazing once you can open up how far it goes.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think, like you said, too, what I always rely to, and I tend to sit here and think like a skeptic all the time.
Right.
And I try to place myself in their shoes because I want them to have this, like you said, I want to scream it from the mountaintops too. But, and, people could say, well, you're doing a podcast. You are, but that's not what I mean. But so I look from the skeptic standpoint and I'm always like, okay, well, if I was there, what questions would I be asking and what would mean something to me in this? And so what I say is, when you talked a little bit about this, and it's energy, it's all these things that we take for granted anyways, but we don't think of them that way. Like for some reason, we put this other stuff in another section and we just put it away. Like, maybe it was from your religious upbringing or something like that causes you to not believe this the way that you should believe it or can believe it. Like you're always going to be a skeptic about it or the afterlife and these things. No, if you think about air, we breathe, there's oxygen, right? You don't see it. It's there. You know what it does. There's radio waves. There's
gravity,
internet waves, gravity, all these things that you believe. And so why is this so far fetched for you? I just don't understand it. And now that, that I'll always ask that question too for you out there, because still, like I said, our humanness comes in, our ego, and we sit there and doubt things too. We still do it. I still do it. I can speak for myself.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, Tom, because you say you don't believe it, but I've been thinking about that a lot, and I feel like it's that we take it for granted.
Yeah.
We assume when we wake up we're going to breathe and we're not going to float up to the ceiling because gravity's at work. I feel like this is part of our existence that we choose, or I don't know if we choose to ignore it, but until we need it, it's just not. You know what pops into my head? Do you know the movie Field of Dreams?
What is it called?
Field of Dreams. It's an old movie with Kevin Costner.
Yeah.
If you build it, they will come. Like, there's this disbeliever in that movie, and then the little girl falls and is about to die, and she's saved by one of the baseball players, and the guy suddenly is like, wait, they've been here the whole time? I see them all now. I feel like that's the moment. Like, until you're thrust into the moment, you may not need it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Makes sense. Yeah. I know there's a path too, for me. And I thought about this too. I may have to research and kind of maybe explain my spiritual path, because all along my life, there's been little things going on. Everybody's is different than that too. But I know that, I was a pastor for a while. I was spiritual care director. I had beliefs about things, and they kind of kept progressing and kind of, little touches here and there, and then big gap of nothingness, living life and just functioning. And then all of a sudden this happens, and so there's a reason for this. There's a reason for everything. There really is. And, we just don't have a void existence here. It's not reality. So yeah, I'm just hoping that people out there, that I tell people all the time, just open yourself up. If you're hearing this, There's no coincidences. You're hearing it for a reason. Explore that in yourself. That's all I can tell you. We are just normal people like you, and we are, we've had experiences happen to us that have brought us to this point. Everybody's at a different point. You're at your point right now out there, and just explore it within yourself. Look into it for yourself. You don't have to believe everything that we say. We're not here to try to convince you, recruit you, whatever. We want you to, because we know the truth. But I mean, and we believe it, and we know what's best for all of us, I think, from what we experience. So when you touch into the divine, and you realize that in your life, and people have done this, finding God, whatever it may be, you change, and it gives you peace in your life. It gives you purpose in your life, and all of those things. And so it's all the same.
Beautifully said. I think that's beautiful.
I appreciate it. Carla, is there anything else that you want to share with people out there that we haven't touched on?
Well, I feel like we all, like I said, I feel like we can all get our messages from our loved ones. So if someone in your life crosses and you have a dream about them, I would suggest writing it down when you wake up, because what's happening is they're coming to visit you, and you don't need a medium for that. That's your loved ones reaching directly out to you, sending your love. Like Tom said, that's the most important thing. It's about this loving connection, and they're letting you know they're around you. So really at least be open to that. That's your loved one, right?
Yeah, and I think that's a great tangible one for people, because they do experience that, and we're in our subconscious state at that point when we're sleeping. And it's interesting that, and again, I'll refer back to Mark Anthony in his book, The Afterlife Principle. He talks about how people receive things in dreams and think it totally normal. But then if it was to, somehow be in real life, that they wouldn't believe that or something, or don't place it in the same realm for some reason, And so that's a great example for people, because everybody dreams, and a lot of people have had those experiences.
Yeah. What I love the most about Mark Anthony's book is that he said he doesn't believe in, when he's doing a reading, the word no. He's like, it's yes or it's I don't know. Yeah. Because like I said, sometimes you get information in the moment you can't remember, or it may come about within a day or two or a week from now. And then it is even more like believable, because you're like, wait a minute, he told me that and it happened now. And I think he has such a great way of looking at things.
Yeah, I think I might have said Afterlife Principles. Afterlife Frequency is the name of his book.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yes.
But yeah, and he says that too. He tries to instruct people on how to receive a reading too, which is great, because, he says something and then he's like, well, okay. And you just say no. And then you might feel a little disheartened or something, because no, that wasn't part, no, that's not something. And then he'll just say, well, just keep your receptors up, like watch for things. It may come up, and he just, instead of saying, don't doubt it, he's saying, or it's not a no, just keep your receptors up, because as a medium, he knows that, there aren't falsehoods coming through. They apply in some way, but the person's got to be open to receive it and see it somewhere. So it may come down the line. It may be applicable to somebody else in their life, and all of a sudden they see it. So there's a lot of different things, but that's good to educate the listener, the sitter, as the mediums say, the person who's receiving the message. And so, yeah, you can learn about that too. So, Carla, thank you. Thanks for taking the time to do this. You're also an affiliate leader in Miami, right?
Oh, yes. I'm a co-affiliate leader. My co-affiliate went to the conference. Her name's Catherine Prescott. And she was so ignited after that. She came back and she's like, we're starting an affiliate group.
Oh,
So
awesome. That happened after? That's cool.
Yeah.
Yes, that's for Helping Parents Heal, everybody. Just so you know,
Yeah.
affiliate leaders, they have them all around the country in different areas. So that's what that is. They have groups. So she has a group in Miami. So if you're in the Miami area, you can look that up if you've lost a child and contact them about that. So Carla, thanks so much for doing this, and nice to get acquainted with you. And as I always tell everybody, I know we'll see each other again and connect again. And it's hard now as I start getting more and more great people on the podcast. It's I'm always like, well, I'd like to have you on again, and then all of a sudden I got this line of people all of a sudden. It's pretty exciting. But
well, that means you're on the right path, Tom.
I guess.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes in Grief podcast. If you'd like access to any of the links that we discussed in today's show, you can find them in the show notes. There's also a link there to support the podcast if you care to. And there is an email link for me there. I'd love to hear from you and your ideas about the show or what you thought about the show. You really can help out this podcast to get to more people if you subscribe, rate, or review it in whichever way your platform provides. Each week, Heroes in Grief is released on Sunday, so look for new episodes there. Thank you again for listening to Heroes in Grief.